You ever look at a computer ad and just your eyes glaze over? Feels like you're trying to read a completely different language, right? Well, today we're cracking that code. We are going to turn all that confusing text speak into something you can actually understand and use. Yeah, something like this. It's just a wall of letters and numbers. And honestly, it's designed to sound impressive, but it mostly just leaves you confused. These terms are thrown at you, and if you don't know what they mean, it's impossible to know if you're getting a good deal or even the right machine for what you need. But don't worry, we're about to make it all make sense. So before we can even think about tackling that ad, we've got to learn the language. Think of this as getting your secret decoder ring, and it all starts with the tiniest pieces of information. Okay, let's start at the absolute bottom, the very foundation of everything, the bit. A bit is the simplest thing you can imagine in the digital world. It's just a switch. It's either on or it's off. That's it. Every single thing your computer does, from showing you this presentation to running the most complex games, is built on billions and billions of these simple on-off switches. You see, one single bit on its own, it's not super useful. So computers are smart. They group them together. A group of 8 bits is called a byte. And here's the key. A byte is the smallest chunk of storage that your computer can actually find. When your computer goes looking for a piece of data, it doesn't look for one bit, it looks for a specific byte. Okay, and to talk about millions or billions of these things, we use prefixes you've definitely heard of. Kilo, mega, giga, and tera. But, and this is a huge but that trips up almost everyone, these words can mean 2 different things. When we talk about storage capacity, like how big your hard drive is, we use powers of 2. But when we're talking about speed, like your processor or internet connection, we use powers of 10. It's a small difference that has a really big impact. And this right here is the perfect example of that confusion. It's one of the biggest mix-ups in tech. A lowercase b is a bit for measuring speed. A capital B is a byte for measuring size. Same goes for lowercase k versus capital K. So a 100 megabit per second internet connection is completely different from downloading a 100 megabyte file. Getting this straight is absolutely crucial. All right, now that we've got the basic lingo down, let's jump back to that ad and start decoding it. First up, the brain of the whole operation. The processor. So this is the line we're going to pick apart. We see Intel i5, okay, that's the brand and model, but the juicy parts are quad-core and 2.2 gigahertz. What do those actually mean for you when you're using the computer? So let's crack this open. The processor is the brain. It carries out all the instructions. Quad-core means it's like having 4 brains working together at the same time. This is what lets you multitask like a champ. You can edit a photo, have 20 browser tabs open, and stream music all at once without things grinding to a halt. Then there's 2.2 gigahertz. That's its clock speed. Think of a tiny clock inside the chip, ticking 2.2 times billion times every single second, keeping everything perfectly synchronized. A higher number there usually means a snappier, faster computer. Okay, next up is a big one. We've got to untangle 2 words that sound kind of similar but do totally different jobs, memory and storage. And the best way to get it is to think about a workbench versus a filing cabinet. So, first, let's look at the memory spec from the ad. It says 16 GB DDR3 SDRAM. Now, don't worry about all those letters. They just describe the specific type of memory. The parts we really care about are 16 GB and the word RAM. RAM, or random access memory, that's your workbench. It's the super fast temporary space where you put all the stuff you're working on right now. The bigger your workbench, like the 16 gigabytes we see here, the more projects you can have open and spread out at once without everything getting cluttered and slow. If you're just browsing the web, you don't need a giant workbench. But if you're a gamer or video editor, a huge workbench is non-negotiable. Okay, so if RAM is the workbench, now we're turning to the filing cabinet, the hard disk. The ad says it has a 1 terabyte drive, running at 7,200 RPM with a SATA connection. Let's pull that apart. Yep, the hard disk is your long-term storage. It's the big filing cabinet where you stash everything, your apps, your photos, your documents, even when the power's off. 1 terabyte is a massive amount of storage. The 7,200 RPM tells us how fast the platters inside are spinning. Faster is better for pulling files out of the cabinet quickly. And SATA is just the name of the cable and port it uses to connect to everything else. So what this all reveals is a fundamental trade-off in computing. You can have something that's big, or you can have something that's fast, but it's really hard to have both. Your computer gets around this with something called a memory hierarchy.
The absolute fastest but tiniest memory is called cache, and it's built right into the brain. Then you have your RAM, your workbench, and finally you have the biggest but slowest layer, the hard disk, your filing cabinet. Your computer is constantly, cleverly shuffling data between these layers to keep everything running as fast as possible.
Okay, so we've got the brain, the workbench, and the filing cabinet. But how do they all talk to each other? And how do they connect to the stuff on your desk? Well, that's where the data superhighway comes in. Naturally, the ad mentions ports for plugging stuff in, and the one we all know and love, of course, is USB. This is basically your computer's front door to the outside world. At their core, ports are just gateways for data to flow in and out of your machine. Back in the day, we had things like serial and parallel ports, which were, let's just say, a bit clumsy. But then USB, the Universal Serial Bus, came along and completely changed the game. It's smart. It figures out what you plugged in all by itself. That's why we call it plug and play. All right, so that's how we connect things on the outside. But what about the information highways inside the computer? The ad mentions a PCIe video card, and that PCIe part is exactly what we're talking about.
So to get what PCIe is, you first got to understand the concept of a bus. No, not the kind you ride to work. In a computer, a bus is basically a data highway, a set of wires that connects everything inside. And the speed of that bus is critical. It's the ultimate speed limit for your entire system. And that brings us to PCI Express, or PCIe. Think of this as a special express lane on that data highway. It's built for the components that need to move a ton of information really, really fast. We're talking powerful video cards for gaming or high-end sound cards. This keeps them from causing a traffic jam and slowing everyone else down. And just like that. Take a look. That crazy, intimidating list of jargon from the beginning, suddenly it's not so scary, is it? You know that 2.2 gigahertz quad core is a fast 4-part brain. You know 16 GB of RAM is the size of your workbench. PCIe is a fast lane for your video card. And L1 cache is that lightning-fast memory sitting right next to the brain. We've busted the jargon. So the next time you're shopping for a computer and you see one of those ads, you're not going to see a foreign language anymore. You're going to see a map of components where you understand what each part does and why it matters. You now have the power to figure out what you're really looking at and make a choice that's right for you. So the only question left is, now that you can read the map, where do you want to go?